Hi, my name is Karen. I'm a certified integral yoga instructor and massage therapist at Way Wellness Center in Pittsburgh. This video is part of the meditation video series, and we will be discussing 8 different meditation techniques that you can use during a seated meditation. These are not the only techniques, but 4 are very basic techniques and 4 are more focused on yoga philosophy. So we will go through all 8 of those techniques with a little time in between each one for you to pause, take notes, think about what works for you, what might not work for you. We'll also include information in a printable PDF about these techniques, just like we will with all the meditation videos and the videos in the other series. So don't feel like you need to memorize all of this. You may need to practice one or more of these a few times before you feel like you found one that really rings true with you. It's recommended, though, that once you find one that works for you, that you try to stick with that one the most often so you're not bouncing around between different techniques. And now, before I get into the 8 different types of the meditations, I want to talk about a concept called sankalpa. It doesn't translate directly, but it basically means a firm resolution with yourself. So it's not even a promise, it's more of a commitment than that. But it's something that you take very seriously. And once you make this firm resolution with yourself to do the practice, or when you're sitting, you make the firm resolution with yourself to move as little as possible or not at all, so that you have time for the when the body is resting, the mind is more inactive. The more you move around, the more the mind will move around. So the goal is to try to sit still, but also knowing that if you're experiencing discomfort and it's painful, that you need to readjust some things. But that sankalpa becomes very important when you are doing a meditation practice, especially at first, because the mind will try to stop you. The body and the mind try to stop you from doing this because it is a change in the patterning and conditioning that they've developed over time, and they will try to keep redirecting you to this. And it's not malicious, but it's like setting a new groove in a record. You have to create it and be patient with it and keep going back to it, so that sankalpa, that firm resolution that you set with yourself, is that commitment to yourself, to your practice. And it can be very beneficial, and it can be frustrating too, because you want to move, you want to wiggle, you want to itch, you want to sneeze, whatever it is. But taking that commitment seriously is very important to this practice. So now we'll start to talk about the the first 4, and I say basic because these are not necessarily specific to yoga. They don't really hinge on a specific philosophy. They're things that you might have even heard of previously, that others have talked about or taught you. If you've looked for a meditation practice before, they're just very basic, easy, common things. So you can pick one or try one, and if it doesn't work, try another one. And it's not as much of a academic it's not as much of an academic engagement to really learn and understand these. The other 4 that I'll talk about after these are much more philosophical, and they can be a little bit on the lofty side, especially if you're not a philosophical type of person. So these are a little bit more concrete, a little bit easier to pick up at first. And if you're not into the idea of doing this for a spiritual practice, these are much less of a spiritual focused nature than the other four are going to be. So we'll start with what is called observing. So observing would be sitting in silence and observing the thoughts as they come and go. Allowing thoughts to occur without getting caught up in them. So what does that mean? It means when you're sitting quietly with the eyes closed, you'll notice that there may be a ton of thoughts at first. And that oftentimes we get caught up in these thoughts. We get caught up in wanting to follow the thought and wanting to follow the storyline. And this practice is not doing that. So it's not a practice of silencing the mind, because I will be very real with you right now. The likelihood of you being consciously able to silence the mind is pretty slim. It's even said by people who have been meditating for years and decades that the mind never really actually goes silent. It's just that you learn not to look at the thoughts anymore. You learn not to follow the thoughts. So being able to sit there and start to realize that you can watch a thought happen without getting caught up in it. And the more that you practice this, just letting it pass by, it said like letting clouds pass by in the sky. You can see them coming across your vision, but you don't have to turn your head to follow them. So thinking of it this way, seeing a thought coming in, letting it pass and let it go. And with this practice, you can also consciously choose to notice a thought and how it makes you feel, but practicing that non-attachment of needing to dig into it. And maybe if it's something that you don't follow, but it sticks with you after you've done the meditation, you can then write down how it made you feel, write down what the thought was, because maybe it is something that you need to look at and process. But we have like something like millions of thoughts an hour. So the chances of every single thought that you have being something that you need to sit and process is, again, it's unlikely. We don't really need to think about like what color socks we were wearing yesterday, and if anybody noticed that one was brown and one was black. Like, nobody cares. That's not something that you need to get caught up thinking about. Just as an example. So depending on how active your mind already is, or how active you notice your mind already is, because chances are you're going to start to notice that your mind is more active than you thought it was. This practice is good for just starting to get used to letting a thought happen without you having to chase after it or create a new story from it. So again, the benefit of that is you are able now to try to start taking that practice into everyday life so that you can stay more focused on what's happening in the present moment and not getting caught up in all your thoughts in your head when you're sitting in a meeting, when you're on a phone call, when you're playing with your kids, when you're having dinner with your spouse, when you're talking to your parents, when you're walking the dog. Like, it'll start to get to the point where you can actually just do those things without every single thought from the last 6 years of your life coming flooding into your head. So that's the first one. It's called observing. The next one I would like to talk about in the basic four is visualization. So prior to sitting in meditation, choose a simple object that you can recreate in your mind. And then during the meditation, you're concentrating, you're focusing on recreating this object in your mind down to the texture and the shadows on the object. So this is very focused. So if you're a very visual person, this could be very helpful for you, because you can see, okay, I have this little statue that I like. It could be anything. I recommend an inanimate object so that you're not necessarily invoking the energy and thought around like your dog or something. But picking some easily recreated inanimate object and then recreating that in the mind to extreme detail while you're sitting, because it takes a lot of focus to really just think about that one thing and give it detail. It's very easy to think about something and then like gloss over the details, but if you really sit and you think about an object, okay, well, I have this statue and it's a woman pouring water out of a vase, and she is young and has long hair, and her hair is brown, and then she has the vase that's in her hands, and the vase is made of something yellow, and then you can start to really just totally form this image in your mind for the duration of your meditation. So it gives your mind something to do without having to really chase thoughts, because you've consciously selected an object that you can recreate and focus entirely on. I've heard of people using stones, just like a big stone like you have in your yard as a decoration. You can use a flower, like a rose. Like if you really like plants, you can pick a plant that you really love, that you're familiar with, and then try to recreate that object completely in your mind. And then over time, it might get easier and easier to do this. So you can go deeper and deeper into detail and then looking at every piece of that object in detail. So that's the basic of visualization. There are other types of meditation that use visualization, like guided visualizations. You can use those too, but the type of visualization I'm talking about doesn't require you to have a recording or instruction or anybody telling you what to do. This is something you can select on your own so that you're completely autonomous and you can practice this anywhere without sound. But you can get lots of different recordings of visualized guided meditations. Usually it's talking about you walking down a path to a beach and in detail describing the scene and asking you to like picture your ideal day and that kind of thing. So if you really thrive on having like a sound to focus on to create that picture, that could be something really helpful for you. I don't really teach that type of meditation, but there are lots and lots of recordings out there for people who are excellent at providing that type of meditation. So I would encourage you to look for that if that's something you're interested in. The next type of meditation I want to talk about is watching the breath. So focusing on the breath and observing the breath moving in and out, focusing on how the breath feels, the smoothness of the breath, and the temperature. So at first, closing the eyes, starting to bring your awareness into the breath, starting to feel the breath moving the body. And you can start to feel the way the breath, not just the way the body moves, but the way the air itself is moving in and out of the body. You can feel how it's moving in and out through the lungs. You can feel the way the air feels moving in and out of the lungs. Is it dry? Is it moist? Is it whatever adjective you want to ascribe to the breath? That's really what you want to start with. And just over time, all of these little pieces that you start to pick apart and see how the temperature and the smoothness and all of that, eventually you may end up just overall noticing the energy of the breath and then feeling the breath as a whole. And I don't have a way to verbally describe what that means, but basically what you're doing in this practice is you're observing the prana as it moves in and out of the body, but at first you're just going to be focusing on the physicality of the breathing practice. As the meditation practice progresses, it will become much more of an energetic practice to observe the prana, the energy flowing in and out of the body. The fourth basic practice that I want to talk about is embodiment. Embodiment is really actually feeling inside the body, into the body, feeling you are part of the body. And for those of you that are already capable of doing this, which is, probably more than half the population, give or take, it can be very, you can feel inside the body and you're like, what are you talking about? Of course I can feel my body. I'm inside my body's here. The other half of the population can't do that naturally. They have to work on that. It's just a personality thing. Everybody's a little bit different, and your ability and your level of ability to feel the body and be aware of the body is going to be different for every single person. So in embodiment meditation, you're focusing on feeling fully inside the body and not allowing the mind to wander to what the body looks like. So this is all about sensation. This is not about what you look like. This isn't a superficial scan of the body. This is really actually feeling what your body feels like and letting it feel that way without you trying to control it. So feeling how it feels to be fully present inside your body. You can pick up one area or part of the body to notice at a time, but don't let the mind wander all over the place. You can slowly allow the mind to travel through the body to really feel the sensations and experience this, but you're doing this less with the mind than you are with your awareness, which is another concept that may be a little unfamiliar for you, but we can feel things and experience things with our awareness without using our discerning mind to tell us what they are. So really being able to connect with how you feel and how the body feels is not necessarily a mental exercise. A good example of how to do this is to do a body scan. You can just sit in your meditation posture and then start with the toes. Think about what the toes are feeling. Notice what the toes are feeling. Then notice what the top of the feet are feeling. Notice what the ankles are feeling. The shins, the knees, the thighs, the hips. What are you feeling inside of your butt, your low back, your belly? And continuing throughout the body, this is not judgmental. Again, this is not about anything other than what is currently being felt without the judgment of why you're feeling that way. And you may start to notice emotions that come up, difficult thoughts. The mind might try to trick you into moving quickly away from somewhere if the sensation is uncomfortable or painful. Obviously, if you're sitting in meditation and something is painful physically and it is causing you extreme pain, you should stop and change your posture. But what I'm talking about as far as discomfort and pain is more of a sensation in your awareness rather than a physical sensation, although you may get some physical sensations with this. So this one's really good, especially if you experience dissociation and often have trouble feeling like you're connected to yourself or connected to your body. Some people who have anxiety and depression often experience this feeling of just complete disconnect from their physical body, and a good method of really calming or grounding yourself is to do this practice. So this is something that can be done anywhere, anytime, all day, anytime you start to feel like you're disconnected, especially if you're in a situation where you're constantly thinking outwardly, or projecting your focus onto like a screen. So if you're someone who spends a lot of time in front of a computer at work, or works remotely from home and you're on the computer all day, for somebody who is constantly providing care for somebody else in a very stressful situation, taking time to like really pull yourself back into your body and notice what's going on is a good way to ground yourself and give yourself a reality check on how you're feeling, so that you can take care of yourself. So this is a really good practice for a lot of different things, but for the seated meditation, it can be a very enlightening, not in the true sense, but it can bring a lot into your awareness. You can bring a lot into your awareness about what you really need to do to help yourself progress. So those are the four basic that are not quite as yogi spirituality focused. The next four are much more specific to yoga practices. So I'm going to use some Sanskrit words. I'll let you know what those mean. And I will try to provide some basic instruction on these. If you are interested in these four practices and you would like more personalized instruction, you can set up an appointment to speak with me. I might be happy to show you how to do this or talk to you more about the philosophy behind these. But I'm going to try to keep it very basic for this video. So the first one that I'd like to talk about is called japa. Japa is a repetition of a mantra or the divine name. That's it. That's all that means. It can be something that you do out loud or silently to yourself. At first, it may be easier to do out loud, but if you're in a place where you can't do it out loud, you can actually just repeat it in your head over and over. And some people have interest in sacred numerology, and one of the most common tools used with japa is a mala. A mala is essentially the same thing as a rosary. So in Catholicism and some of the other Christian faiths, the use of a rosary for prayer is a pretty well-known practice. So a mala is essentially the same thing, but it's from the South Asian pantheon of Hinduism, and it can be used in a similar way to count the number of repetitions that you're doing. Usually they are in a string of 108 beads with a single bead at the bottom. So on the mala, you would count by holding the bead between the thumb and the middle finger and allowing the bead to move. And then there's the guru bead, as it's often called, is the large bead that you get to at the end, so that you know that you've finished 108 repetitions. You can also do them in nines, so 9 or 27 is also another common breakdown, but usually the mala is more often used for just something to do with your hand to help you keep alert while you're doing the practice and to help you pay attention to what it is that you're repeating. So when I say repetition of mantra or the divine name, mantra, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in the mantra videos, but a mantra could be something as simple as Om or Om Shanti, Om Namah Shivaya. Those are pretty common, simple Sanskrit mantra that can be used. They're easy to remember, they're easy to pronounce. But you can also just repeat the divine name. So depending on what religious or spiritual background you have, you can choose to repeat the name of that individual. And you can even do it silently, because I know in some practices you're not supposed to say those names out loud, but you can say them silently to yourself in your head. So there is not a specific, you must say Om Namah Shivaya to do this. You can do something that means something to you. And on that note, you can also use a personal mantra. So if there's a word or a short phrase, you can do a longer phrase, but it does get to be harder to keep your alertness with it, because you get distracted by remembering the longer phrase. But if you have a short phrase or a word that you feel really means something to you, that is positive and non-harming and uplifting, you can use that word or a short phrase. And again, it can be out loud or it can be silently. The repetition creates a vibration and it leaves an imprint. So we learn by a repetition. So if you're repeating something that has a divine or a positive vibration, it is infusing it back into your cellular matrix and your energy. It creates a new groove in the thought process so that you have something else to fall into. And over time, that repetition, if it's one that you have, that you use often, it just becomes automatic. It's not something that you necessarily have to think of or practice or even have a mala to help you do. It can just automatically go. And on that note, I'm going to talk about the next one. This one starts to become a little bit more philosophical. So the japa is still a little bit concrete, but this one's going to be a little bit more on the philosophical side. So a japa, as you can hear in the name, sounds a lot like japa. So a japa is the non-repetition of repetition. Is literally what that means. So a japa would be no repetition, and japa is repetition of the divine name. So what you're doing with this practice is you're tuning in to the sound of nature or existence around you and observing the repetition as it occurs without our controlling it. So this is based on the philosophy that the vibrational sound of everything can be heard if you are silent enough. It's always there, but we have become too cluttered and too busy to allow ourselves the time to tune into this and hear it or feel it. So when you are sitting in meditation, not focusing on the thoughts that are coming, and you allow yourself to tune into the existence that is around you, you might be able to hear this very, very quiet, somewhat inaudible sound vibration. Sometimes it is called just Om. Other times it is said that it sounds like a so hum, which is just a sound. So hum is just a sound. So to do this practice, you have to really let yourself believe that this is true. If you don't believe that everything has a sound and everything has a vibration, you're probably not going to let yourself hear anything. or feel it. And that's not saying that it's the mind creating that vibration, but it's saying that you have to allow the mind to be open enough to let the inner awareness hear the vibration. So again, that one is a little bit more on the abstract end of things. It does take a quiet room. I would say that if you're going to do this one, I don't recommend doing this at your office at work. This would be something you'd want to try to do in a much more quiet space, especially at first. So that's a japa japa. The last, no, it's not the last one, the third, the third one, again, this becomes even more abstract. This is called neti neti. If you've ever been familiar with any type of holistic or alternative medicine, in nasal cleansing, you might be thinking this is a neti pot. Why are you talking about neti? It's not the same. The word is similar. I don't believe it has the same meaning. A lot of Sanskrit words have multiple meanings, so in context it would potentially mean something different. But neti neti is the practice of self-inquiry. Who am I? I am not this. I am not that. So you're separating your self-identification by eliminating that which we are not. This one is definitely philosophical. You are systematically allowing yourself to disidentify with everything so that you come to the eventual understanding that all these things that we identify as ourselves is not who we truly are inside in our inner awareness. It's a practice of non-attachment. It's definitely somewhat of a discernment practice, but it's a discernment practice through an almost denial of our intellectual nature. Because logically we want to say, this is me, this is my body, this is my hair, this is my face, this is my mind, this is my past, this is my future, this is my job, this is my family, this is, and all these constructs around us that are temporary. Everything is temporary. All these temporary constructs around us that we over-identify with so deeply that when one of them changes or leaves us, we have tumultuous breakdown, either on a minor level or a major level. So through this practice of disidentification while sitting in meditation, you start to uncover the truth that these are just things in our lives. These are not the things that make us who we are unless we attach to them and make them those things. So that's all I want to say about that one. That one is much more of a self-discovery practice. There are some really great educators and inspirational people who teach this practice. One of them being Adyashanti. He is in the United States. He is American. He does have books, presentations, all of those things. This one also tends to feel along the lines more of a Buddhist practice, for anybody familiar with those. So if this kind of appeals to you more than the other ones, I would recommend you can either set up a time to talk with me and we can go deeper into this, or I recommend that you look into Adyashanti and some of the other people that practice this. It's from a tradition called Jnana Yoga. That's in the English transliteration, it's Jnana, Jnana Yoga. The last one is called Tratak. It's a little bit easier than the other ones as far as philosophy goes, but it can be a much more complicated physical practice. So essentially what you're doing in this practice is you're staring at an object or a light. This is traditionally a candle flame. And you can also use the image of a divine being, a guru, or what is called a yantra. A yantra is a visual representation of a sound vibration. So certain mantra have a yantra that go with them, and it is the visual representation of the vibration that that mantra creates. That's why this one gets a little bit more philosophical as well, because it's sort of you're invoking the vibration of the divine being or the guru or the yantra through your direct interaction with it with your eyes. You don't necessarily stare at the object unblinking, especially not at first. With this one, it's much easier to do short bursts of this. So finding the object or a candle flame that you would like to stare into, you keep your eyes closed, then you open, you stare at the object until the eyes start to water, which for most of us, especially at first, is not going to take a very long time. You let it blur a little bit, and then you close your eyes so that you might still see that image behind the eyes as they're closed. And then you focus on maintaining that image. As that disappears, you can stay in the meditation, or you can open the eyes again, stare at the object again until the eyes water, blur, and lose focus, and then close them again. The other thing I'd like to say about this is, obviously with an image, it's going to be far less impactful to the vision than the candle flame, but the candle flame itself, there are also some benefits of it. That one is considered, I believe, a kriya, which is a purification, so it's kind of a double benefit where you are purifying the eyes and the vision with the light and the tears that it produces, and you're also still getting that meditative mental image effect. But it is definitely something that you have to want to do and get used to doing, and staring at an image might be a better way to start if you're not ready to be looking at a candle flame. So finding that image, it can be any divine being, guru, or yantra. If you have questions about yantras, you can Google some of those, just YANTRA, and you can find those pretty easily. I would print them out. Don't stare at a screen. Actually stare at a physical print or a physical candle, not a picture or a flashlight or something. You need this to be like a real solid object, not a projection of an object. The divine being could be any saint or sage. That includes Jesus or the Virgin Mary. It does not have to be somebody from an Eastern or a South Asian tradition. It could be somebody that means something to you. The guru could be anybody that you followed as a teaching. Again, Jesus, Swami Satchidananda, Swami Shivananda, any of those types of beings who are looked at as being realized or of divine inheritance, because it is said in this tradition that images of divine beings carry a vibration with them. So we've talked about 8 different techniques in this video. It's quite a lot of information. You may want to watch this a few times, or if you've written some things down, taken some notes to kind of check them out. There is quite a bit of information about this out there, but if you'd like to have a more personalized conversation about it, just let me know. And again, with all of these practices, as you're working through your meditations, having a journaling or some kind of a creative practice to help you process what comes up during your meditations, either mentally, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, or physically, is going to be really important for most people, just so that you have that process of the releasing and processing that occurs. So selecting the best technique for you, again, it's going to be more of what sounded like something that might work the best for you, and then trying it out a few times. And if it feels right, stick with it. If it feels like, I'm probably not going to do this, this is a lot of work, I don't really understand this technique, then you're kind of fighting yourself. So don't pick something that's going to make you fight yourself. This should be full of effort, but full of ease at the same time. The effort should not be strenuous and painful and completely uncomfortable. There's going to be a little bit of discomfort, but that comes naturally. It shouldn't start right away that you're forcing yourself to do a technique that doesn't jive with you. So if you have any questions, give us a call, 412-772-1461, or send an email, waywellnesscenter@gmail.com.